Well, hello and welcome to Blue Ridge. My name's Jeremy. I'm one of the pastors and teachers here at Blue Ridge. If you're new, we're excited you are here, and I'll tell you a little bit about who we are. Our mission as a church is to help people follow Jesus, and we accomplish this by equipping disciples, that is current disciples, current followers of Jesus, to make other disciples, other followers of Jesus. And so what you see here this morning is our desire to be obedient to what we believe God has called us into. You see two elements that we believe are essential on a Sunday morning to really that equipping process of disciples, current followers of Jesus, is community with one another, connection with one another, and learning that moves just from listening to someone speak at us for 40 minutes or so to really beginning to engage with these truths within community, even if it's just in a small way, because we really are convinced that if we can't do that type of stuff in here together, where the reality it's a relatively safe place where many of us are on this journey of learning what it looks like to follow Jesus and trying to become better at what it looks like to follow Jesus. If we can't do that here together within this community, then our belief is we'll never be able to really do it out in the world in which we live, eat, play, and work, and go to school. And so part of what you see around here as you look at us gathered in circles around tables is our desire to be obedient to this calling of this disciple-making movement that we believe God has for us. And so several lessons we have learned along the way as you're regularly here, you hear this every week, that it's really works best if there's at least 4 people at every table, that if it's more than just the people you came with sitting at your table, and if there are different ages, if at all possible, different ages represented at the table, it just makes it for what we believe is a more full experience. So in a few moments, I'm gonna ask everyone to stand up, and you're gonna look around, you're gonna greet each other, say, hey, get to know someone, that kind of stuff. But you're also gonna use it as an opportunity, if you're a Blue Ridger, to either go and join another table or invite some other people to join your table and condense on down. So get everybody to stand on up, look around and say hey to someone or condense down. Awesome, guys. Come back to your seats, condense down. If you notice somebody still alone, go ahead and invite them over afterwards. Love the intentionality. I love watching people, multiple people walking halfway across the room and realizing someone else already got them. Love that. Love that. Love being that type of community. So, for those, if you didn't already, could you grab a card from the center, write your name on it, fold it in half so that people can remember your name? For those of you watching online, introduce yourself below. We're glad that you're here, but we'd love to help you get connected, even if it's getting connected in a virtual way. We want to help you take that next step towards connection. So, awesome. Well, here's where I want to begin this week. I want to begin with this question for you guys to discuss your tables. What is something you've accomplished in your life that was hard but rewarding? What's something you've accomplished in your life that was hard but rewarding? Maybe it was some sort of physical thing that you trained for, that you were able to do, that like you were able to do, is difficult but it's rewarding. Maybe it's a state of your marriage, like it wasn't always as good as it is now and it was a lot of hard work to get it there. Maybe you're a parent with older kids and you look at them and you know parenting hasn't been easy, but you're so proud of where they are now. Maybe it has to do with your degree that you're engaging in. Maybe it has to do with a team you made, something like that. Whatever it may be, maybe it's something you made with your hands. What's something that was challenging or something you accomplished in life that was hard but rewarding, okay? Take the next 3 minutes, and those of you that are a little bit more, maybe more outgoing, give someone else at your table the gift of going second by volunteering to go first, okay? I'll give you 3 minutes. I'll let you know when we're about halfway through. Go for it, guys. Okay, I'm gonna interrupt you wherever you're at right now. So as you may or may not know, my family and I, we just got back from recently just got back from a a 2.5 week road / camping trip out west of Colorado, where I'm from. And my family and I, we love road trips and we love camping together. But even as much as we love doing that stuff, I also realize that I'm a husband to Jana, and I'm also a dad to two girls. And so I want to, every time we do something like this, I want to make it the best possible experience I can for them so that they'll continue to enjoy it. So with that in mind, back in 2018, I decided that, I wanted something that I started kind of dreaming and researching a way that, I could make camping just a little bit more comfortable for us by looking up kind of some DIY camper ideas that I could maybe build out. But here's the deal. While I wanted something that offered some more comfort to sleep in and cook and that kind of stuff, I still wanted to be small enough where we could take remote Jeep roads and dirt roads to get into kind of dispersed remote areas, because we're not really camping kind of family. And I didn't want it also to cost me like the next 4 years of my salary to be able to afford something like that. And so after about a year of deep dive into YouTube and research and looking at all sorts of different options, in 2019, I purchased this 6x10 enclosed cargo trailer. And that's all it was at the time, was this enclosed cargo trailer. And I've shown this picture before, and because many of you have said, hey, what does it look like actually on the inside? Well, after 2 years of work on it from 2019 to 2021, even though we used it almost immediately when we got it, I'll give you a little peek into the inside of what it's evolved into. What you see here are the girls, their bunk beds. This is at the front of the area. There's the girls' bunk beds, and they can fold up and fold down. This lower bunk bed right here can also function as a bench. You can fold that one up out of the way so your head doesn't sit on it. Below it, what you can't see here is a series of drawers that runs the length of it that I built out in there so you can storage in this small of a space is always essential. When you move towards looking at the back on the next slide, what you see here is, this is looking out the back from the girls' bunk beds are behind us now. This is mine and Jana's bed that I built. It's somewhere between a full size and a queen, and the platform I built that on. Below our bed, you see a couple more drawers for clothing and different things like that. Right here, these glowing blue dots and ports and things like that. These are ways to recharge. Got a whole system that's made to run off-grid. You run through solar power and things like that. I designed it so you can charge devices. You've got lights, you've got a fan, things like that. All runs off of 12-volt kind of power rather than your 120 AC. From there, as you look at the center wall, this always entertains people. We love camping in the winter. And so this is literally a little mini wood stove. Genuinely, you burn 4-inch logs in it. Real wood stove in here. So we've camped in the single digits, and that'll cook us out of that thing. Chimney and everything in there, like your little own mobile cabin in the woods. Love it there. So moving on to the back of it, this is looking back and in, and because we designed this not to be inside but to be outside, just with a little bit more comfort. You're looking at the kitchen, and you got this 12-volt cooler that actually doesn't require any ice, just runs off the electrical, so that side of things. But these things are under our bed, but you've got these industrial slides right here. They use in ambulances and fire trucks and things like that, hold like 500 pounds. And I built this and designed this kitchen that pulls out of the back underneath our bed platform. There you got our cooktop and everything. You got the cooler refrigerator thing right here for us to make meals from and do that. In fact, even right here, this right here is this is a Pelican case that I put in a little outdoor shower there, so we get a little privacy tent that can pop up, that can clean off, and everybody can get fresh when we're out camping for multiple weeks at a time out there. And so people ask, where's the toilet? And I go, I didn't want to turn them into complete softies. There's a whole wilderness outside where they can go and dig holes. So Some of you are going, nope. You almost had me until that point. So, 2 years of hard work into that, and we have been able, over the last handful of years, to really enjoy some of the most remote places all across the United States in this thing, and that we built, and a lot of hard work from the weekends and things like that. And I think most of us are aware that some of the best experience of life, the gateway to many of the best experiences of life, is actually hard work. I think most of us, we believe that and own that. In fact, Vince Lombardi, one of the coach of the Green Bay Packers, famous coach of the Green Bay Packers, he said this: the dictionary is the only place that success comes before work, right? And so I think many of us, we really do believe that and embrace the value of hard work and what hard work can bring, which causes a problem when we talk about the gospel, the good news of Jesus' grace, because hard work doesn't seem to fit in the place where we would expect to find it, given the rest of experience of our life. Our own effort doesn't seem to fit where we would naturally want to place it when it comes to the gospel and a relationship with God, given what we see and how many of us value a day's or a season's hard work. And so we started this series at the beginning of the summer that we're quickly drawing to the end of. Here next week, we'll finish it up. We've been going through the book of Galatians, and we've been looking at the idea of what really is the gospel? What is the true gospel? And where does our own effort fit into it? And so from the very beginning, we started building this equation, if you will, of the gospel, the basic gospel, and where it begins. The gospel begins with our sin, our rebellion against God. But God was unwilling to leave us there, so he added to our sin his grace, ultimately expressed through Jesus, his death and burial and resurrection from the cross. And to that, to gain the opportunity to be accepted by God, we add absolutely nothing. We add absolutely nothing to that to gain the possibility to experience acceptance by God. And so we saw early on, we put this in parentheses because we saw early on that while this is a truth that's out there and available for every single one of us, it doesn't mean that we've unlocked it personally for ourselves. So then the question became, how do we unlock this? And we saw several weeks in that it's through faith. That faith unlocks this for us as individuals, this trust, this belief that Jesus is who he claims to be. It's not about even the amount of our faith, but it's who our faith is in, and that's who Jesus is. And certainly then we make the assumption after this, based on our idea of works and effort and things like that certainly then our effort comes next. But what we've discovered is it doesn't, that faith leads to this new identity. This new identity, we saw that these identities, that we're invited to be a part of a new family where we're adopted as children. And as children, we have this new inheritance, that we're a part of this family, that before God asks us to do a single thing, that we've now received this new identity, this new family that we're a part of, because he wants us to know, or he wants us to security, he wants us to know the security we can operate in and from. That there's nothing I can do today or that I will do tomorrow that will make God's acceptance of me any more or any less. And then from there, we move to chapter 5 of Galatians, and we finally get to this place of him asking us to do something. We finally get to this place of works, of our own effort after this place, and of all the things he could have asked us to do. Like go on some great spiritual pilgrimage to memorize and recite a bunch of holy scriptures, to do some great grand act of sacrifice for him. What does he ask us to do? He asks us to love people the way that we have been loved. To express the love that Jesus has expressed to us. The type of love this agape love that David talked about, that drove Jesus to the cross, where even on the cross, to his enemies, he's prayed to the Father and said, Father, forgive them. They have no idea what they are doing. And how many of us would argue that the world would be a better place, right? If communities like ours, people who are living in the security and acceptance and the fullness of a relationship with God, loved people with the same type of love that Jesus loved us with, and the kind of impact we could have on the world. But when you look at that type of love, and as much as I believe we desire to love people that way, we look at that type of love and it feels kind of daunting. In fact, overwhelming, maybe even the word impossible. I mean, we can get how Jesus can love people that way, but how can we really love people that way? The reality is, in and of ourselves, we can't. But part of this new inheritance we saw last week that God gives us as his children is his Spirit inside of us. And Andrew talked about his Spirit that's been placed in inside of us, and this one that was gonna lead us, that was gonna guide us, that was gonna show us what it is to live out this love in the world that we live in these practical, tangible ways. And our job as followers of Jesus, the work and effort we put towards this is to tune our ears to his voice speaking to us and respond to the things he invites us into. And which brings us to this week. And here's what I really do believe. I believe many of us in this room want to love people the way that Jesus loves us. I do. I believe that many of us want to tune our ears to the voice of the Spirit and his leadings and respond to the things that he invites us to do. I really do believe that that's true of many of us here. Because one of the most common questions I get is, how do I recognize the voice of God? How do I recognize his Spirit? I believe it's something we desire. But the reality is, no matter how much we want to be those people, and no matter how much we desire to hear his voice, to love people, the reality is from time to time, every single one of us will fail at listening and responding to his voice. We will. Every single one of us will, no matter how much we desire to love people the way that Jesus loved people, no matter how much we respond to hear his voice and respond in things like the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and all of these things like this, that we will hear his voice, know what he's asking us to do, and choose to respond out of selfish desires, out of things like jealousy and conceit and pride and envy, to respond out of what we talked about last week, our flesh. That as much as we want to do the right things, there will be times where every single one of us will mess this up. So what do we do then? What do we do that when we really desire to listen and to hear and to respond, we do the opposite? We respond out of our own selfish desires. Well, that is exactly where Paul goes next, is showing us how to respond in moments like those. So before we jump into Galatians chapter 6, would you pray with me? Jesus, I thank you so much for the grandness and the scandalous nature of the gospel. I also thank you that it doesn't just stay in the ethereal, it doesn't just stay in the sky, but it moves down. And there are literally the hands and the feet and the practicality that allows us to live out the fullness of the gospel Monday through Saturday. And that's what I pray. I pray that today would be another one of those practical steps we take in knowing how to apply the gospel on Monday, showing us how to do this well together. Because every single one of us are gonna hear your voice at times. And whether it's with our enemy or it's with those closest to us, choose to respond out of our own flesh, out of our own desires, out of our own selfishness. Jesus, would you show us how today you want us to respond when those moments come? It's in your name we pray, amen. So, if you got a Bible, you can open up to Galatians chapter 6. If you didn't bring a Bible with you, there should be a Bible in the center you can grab, or you can actually open up your smartphone to a Bible app, or Google the passage, Galatians chapter 6, it'll pop up there too. And as we jump in at your tables, what you may recognize is that this passage, Galatians 6, looks kind of familiar because back in April, before we knew we were gonna do a series through the book of Galatians, Andrew used this as his main text for a talk he gave there. And so if you recognize, wait, didn't we just go through this? We did. But hopefully, one, God may just want to remind you of something he already said to you that day. The other side of it is, hopefully there's something new that he wants to speak as we walk through that again this morning. And so here's what I want you to do. At your tables, based on the reality that all of us are going to respond out of self rather than his Spirit at times, read the following. So one person, as you guys know, read out loud at your table, Galatians 6, 1 through 6. And here's the deal. If everybody would grab a card right now from the center of your table, everybody grab a card, divide it in half like we did last week. And so you want to grab a card there. On one side, I want you to write the word instructions, and then on the other side, I want you to write the word warnings, okay? So one half of the card instructions, one half of the warnings. And after you've read it out loud together as a table, not while you are reading it, but after you've read it out loud, I want you to discuss at the table, what are the instructions that Paul give us here, and what are the warning? And there should be multiple of each as you make your way through it. And then if you have time at the end, just ask a simple question. If there's a minute or two remaining and at the end, ask yourself, what principles does this teach us? What does it teach us about when we fail? And what does it show us along the way, okay? So I'm gonna give you about 6 minutes. Go for it, guys. Okay, I'm gonna interrupt you now. So before we go through this together, let me just say, I know some of you here aren't followers of Jesus, and the reality is what we're talking about here, while it's written to followers of Jesus, while it's written to the church, these things that we're talking about can be applied to really any relationship, our parenting, our marriage, work, roommates. It really can, most of the things that we're gonna read here. The other thing is, as you're looking at the passage, as you see it come up on the screen, I bolded what I thought were instructions and I underlined what I felt like were warnings. If yours is different than mine, that's okay. Remember, the point is that I'm just adding to the conversation you guys have already began at your table, okay? As we walk through this. So let's start Galatians chapter 6. We're gonna stop here really quickly. It says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in sin. Now, I stopped there right away because usually when I've read this in the past, I think of when I think of sin, I think of those big moral failures, or I think those big scandalous things. And that's where I tend to apply this passage in my mind. But the reality is that this passage, whenever one of us, even though we want to listen to his voice, we want to love people, when we hear his voice and we choose to act out of self, this applies. This applies to us. And when that comes to light along the way, what we're getting ready to read, big and small, it applies to each one of those situations. So, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in sin, you who live by the Spirit, those of you who are listening for his voice and are responding in this moment, okay, to his voice, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. You should act as agents of restoration. That's the heart of God here. Agents, that we would act as agents of restoration. Now, let me talk about kind of this idea of restoring in a couple different ways. One, we need to separate it from position and a place. That's not what he's talking about here, okay? It's not about restoring them necessarily back to a certain position. What a person has done, acting out of own self, may have done so much damage, the position is no longer there to be restored back to. So it's not talking about a position or a place. What it's talking about is restored back into this right relationship with God. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. Our sin does not affect our standing in the family of God. We've already talked about that. It's that plus nothing else. If we are authentically followers of Jesus, that is secure. We have this inheritance. We are his. Okay, but it does affect the relationship between me and him. If there's sin, sin brings death to relationships in different ways. Think about it. If I treat my wife Jana harshly, it doesn't change the fact that I'm still married to her. It doesn't affect my standing in that sense. But what it does affect is it destroys intimacy. It affects the relationship. And so when we're talking about restoration and helping restore, we're talking about walking beside someone who has been caught in just listening to their own voice rather than the voice of God and acting accordingly. And we're saying we're trying to help restore that intimacy and the relationship, the hearing and the listening and responding that they at one time operated from. But that's not the only piece of instruction he gave us right there, right? The other piece of instruction was we're supposed to restore them how? Gently. And if there's anything you take from this stage, from today, it's this first verse. Restore them gently. Every December, as a BR team here, we do a Christmas party. for a group of people. And at that Christmas party, we do this thing. We've done it for the last handful of years where it's, depending on what part of the United States you're from, it's either called Dirty Santa or White Elephant. It's the gift exchange thing. And if you've never played it, basically the point is that everyone brings a gift, and without it being assigned to one person in particular. And then you go through in an assigned order, and people start taking gifts from the center. And you can either choose a new gift or you can steal a gift from someone who's already gone, right? And the whole point, some people bring gag gifts, other people bring, something that's a little more coveted by the group. And the goal of the game is to, end up with one of the better gifts and to leave somebody stuck with one of the gag gifts. It's the spirit of Christmas, right? So we do that, we go through it. So this last year, in my desire to have a good time and crowds amp me up, and I'm there, and so I may have, at multiple points during the game, threatened to take a gift from a toddler that was there. And I may have been encouraging people to take my gift so I could steal that gift from them and from that toddler. And I thought it was funny. Not everybody did. And so the next day, I think it was, I had a friend very gently come to me and kindly come to me and say, hey, Jeremy, I know you were trying to have fun, and I know what you were doing there was lighthearted, but to some people it came across as harsh and uncaring. And I know that's not who you are, and I know that's not how you want to come across, and that's frankly not how I want you to come across to people. Now, nobody likes being on either side of that conversation. Right? Nobody likes being on either side of that conversation. And the reality is, in all honesty, I did push back and I did debate in that moment because I didn't fully understand it. But what I did say is I said at the end of it, thank you for coming to me. I really do appreciate it. And I will take the next day or two and I'll go, God, is there something I need to own? And during the next 24 hours, God humbled me a bit and said, Jeremy, it doesn't matter what your intent was. It's how it made other people necessarily feel. And so if you can own your part, you own your part. And I send out an email the next day apologizing. See, that's acting as an agent of restoration. Going to someone gently and humbly and giving them the opportunity to process and hear something, a blind spot that they may have had, a way that they may have been operating that they weren't even realizing. And say, hey, let me gently move you towards this place of considering how your actions affected other people. That's acting as an agent of restoration. But that's not the only warning he gives here, or that's not the only thing he gives here. He gives a warning. Our first warning says, but watch yourselves or you also may be tempted. Now it's interesting, the first warning he gives here isn't to the person who's been caught, quote unquote, in sin, who's kind of acted out of their own self rather than falling sin. But the first warning is actually to those people that are acting as agents of restoration. And it says, hey, watch out that you're not tempted and you fall into sin too. Now, again, let's clarify what they're saying and what they're not saying here. Paul's not saying that the guy who came to me about this is next year, he's gonna be tempted to steal a gift from a toddler at a Christmas party. Okay, that's not what he's saying. He's the temptation is much more subtle than that. That when we're acting as agents of restoration, the temptation is to act from places of pride. I can't believe Jeremy would do that. I would never do anything like that. Even if we never say it to anybody. Temptation to gossip. Did you hear what Jeremy did? Don't worry, I went and talked to him, but did you hear what he did? Harshness. Tempted to act in harshness rather than gentleness. Hey, I can't believe you would do that, Jeremy. It's so embarrassing. And so, as we walk through this, it's easy to walk from a place of pride and superiority rather than from a place of humility and gentleness. He continues, he says this, verse 2, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you fulfill the law of Christ. Now, over the last 2 weeks, we've seen what the law of Christ is. He gives the next piece of instruction here, carry one another's burdens, but he's saying that we fulfill the law of Christ. We've seen that the law of Christ is when we love people the way that Jesus loved us. And what did Jesus do? He was an agent of restoration between us and God the Father. Through the cross, death, and resurrection. He was that agent of restoration. He invites us when we are willing to move into these uncomfortable conversations and help carry the weight of someone else's failure and sin along the way through a place of gentleness to help restore them. We are actually doing what Jesus did for us. We are loving people well. He continues, verse 3, with another warning. Says, if anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Again, not talking to the one caught in sin, talking to the agent of restoration. If you think you're of yourself as more highly than you ought, then guess what? You deceive yourselves. This whole idea that it's so easy in moments of correction, even out of the start of a good heart, to move to a place of thinking of yourself better in the situation. And he warns against that. Verse 4 and 5, he says this, each one then, because it's this warning, each one should, gives us the next piece of instruction, test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing, a warning here, themselves, because you want to compare to someone else. For each one should carry their own load. See, the whole idea is test their actions. It's kind of like what Jesus said. Before you go and take care of the splinter in your brother or sister's eye, why don't you take care of the plank first? Look in your own heart. Is there anything between you and God? Test what you're doing first here. Look at your own heart. Is there places where you're being disobedient? Start there, because that's going to bring us to a place of humility and gentleness. But also in the process, we can look around and we can be like, hey, how come I'm the only one? It feels like I'm the only one helping this person along. Where's everyone else? And so we can start to compare what we're doing compared to what everyone else is doing. He says, no. Your job is not to worry about what everyone else is doing or not doing to help gently restore this person. Your job is to be obedient to the Spirit inside of me. And Jesus is saying, Jeremy, your job is to be obedient to the Spirit inside of you and do the thing that I've called you to do. He continues, verse 5. Verse 6 says, nevertheless, the one who receives instruction in the word should share all good things with their instructor. Now, this has been used, obviously, or in the past to apply to people in my role, pastors and teachers and things like that. And it can be, it's applied in other places in scripture like that. But the reality within this context, he's broadening that scope and saying, hey, Jeremy, if you've been caught in something, somebody comes to you and says, hey, this doesn't reflect the Spirit of God, things like that, that at the very least, we should be saying to that person who's helped instruct us, restore us, and move us to a place where we're hearing and responding to the voice of God. And God again, we should at least be going, I am so grateful that you were willing to risk and come to me. I'm so grateful that you loved me enough to not let me sit in that place, that you act as this agent of restoration. It also can be applied even to the physical in the sense of, depending on what a person may be walking with you through in a season, it may take a lot of their time, free time, family time, and it might move towards physical things like saying, hey, I know you've sacrificed a lot of family time to help walk with me through this last season. Here's a small token of my appreciation. Take your wife out, take your spouse out. Do this thing. That may sound weird, but think about the early church. They had all things in common. They shared, they were willing to express both with words and in deed the impact of the rest of the community on them. Becoming a community that says, you know what? You have walked with me, and I recognize that sacrifice. So what do we do with this? What do we do with this? Well, two ways I want to wrap up here quickly by asking two questions. In fact, would you flip over your card on the other side? Would you flip over that card? Because I want everyone to, for yourself, you're not going to share this with anyone else. First question is, who do I need to invite into what I'm walking through? Who is someone that I need to invite into what I'm walking through? See, the reality is, all of us are gonna fail at listening to the voice of God. And it may be small right now, and you're justifying it, and you're trying to deal with it on your own. And maybe you're not there yet, but at one point you will. Do we have people in our lives that we're risking with relationally, that we're saying, before I'm caught, and before this grows into something big, I'm inviting you on this journey with me. Here's the ugly parts of me. Do we have people that we're inviting to speak to us and say, hey, look at my life. Are there things that don't reflect the truths I believe? Look at what Paul said. He said, as you continued in this passage in Galatians 6, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man will reap what he sows. Whoever sows to please their flesh will from the flesh reap destruction. Whoever sows to please the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. The whole point is this: that little thing will grow. It will. And left to ourselves, it will grow into something that eventually will show up one way or another. God has created community and us as relational beings, as the church, to connect. And before it grows into something so destructive, to have people in our lives that we can say, I'm inviting you to walk this out with me. Look at your card. What's one name? Maybe some of you don't have one name. It's just a question mark you put there. Who's someone that you can invite into this journey with you, or you've invited? The next question is this: is there anyone else I need to go to? As an agent of restoration, as I'm looking around, are there people, not that I need to nitpick with all the smallest, most insignificant thing, but genuinely I see them, I see their character, and I know that's not who they desire to be, but this is what is beginning to pop up. Is there someone that God has had on your mind that you've been pushing off because the conversation is uncomfortable and it's gonna be hard and you're not sure how they're gonna respond, and there's a lot of relational risk? Who do I need to invite into my life? And then who is God placed in my life that I need to go to? Read what Paul wrote just a little bit further as you go down. Verse 9, let us not become weary. This is hard, in doing good. For at the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we don't give up. Like, this will pay off. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let's do good to all people, especially those who belong to the family of believers. This can be applied in and outside the church, but especially to followers of Jesus. That we love each other enough to be willing to have the hard, uncomfortable conversations in gentleness and humility, saying, hey, you know what? There's gonna be a point where I don't get this right. All of us are gonna mess this up. All of us, no matter how much we wanna love people the way that Jesus loved us, all of us, no matter how much we wanna hear his Spirit and respond in things like joy, peace, patience, kindness, we are going to mess this up along the way. The question is, do we have the people in our lives who will in gentleness call us on it? And are we the type of people that are willing to do the hard work, not grow weary, to help reap a harvest, not just in our own life, but in the life of the church as a whole? God has called us to love people as agents of restoration with one another. Would you pray with me? Jesus, this is not simple. It does get messy and it can be exhausting. But you've given us your Spirit. You've given us your Spirit who's willing to walk with us and challenge us and lead us. We don't want to become like the Pharisees who are just looking around for people to fail. But we do want to become people like you, Jesus, who are willing to do whatever it takes to help people experience the fullness of who you are. Would you birth in us a heart of restoration? Would we become more and more the agents of restoration that you invite us to become? It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. Loved being back with you guys this week. Hope you have a great week. Love you guys.